Deep in the Valley of the Kings, inside a tomb designated Cave 35 lies a body that history tried to throw away. It is not wrapped in gold. It has no mask. It was found lying on a heap of rubble in a side chamber, stripped naked, with its right arm torn from the socket. But the most chilling detail is the face. Where a mouth should be, there is a gaping, jagged hole. The jaw is shattered. The teeth are exposed in a permanent, silent scream. For over a century, archaeologists walked past her, cataloging her simply as the younger lady, a nameless victim of ancient tomb robbers. They were wrong. Modern forensic science has now reconstructed the final moments of this woman's life, and the results are terrifying. This was not post-mortem damage. This wound was inflicted while she was alive. We are not looking at a random mummy. We are looking at a crime scene, and if the latest DNA analysis is correct, this battered, mutilated corpse is actually the owner of the most famous face in the ancient world. We have been staring at the limestone beauty of Nefertiti for 100 years, mesmerized by her elegance. But the truth isn't in the statue, it's in the blood. And the blood tells a story of incest, madness, and a brutal political assassination. To understand why this woman was murdered, we have to understand the target on her back. Nefertiti wasn't just a pretty face on a museum pedestal. She was a revolutionary. Along with her husband, Akhenaten, she dismantled 1,000 years of Egyptian religion. They fired the priests, closed the temples, and declared war on the gods themselves, replacing them all with a single sun disk, the Aten. In the art of the time, she isn't depicted as a submissive wife. She is a titan. She is shown driving her own chariot, wearing the crowns of kings, and most shockingly, raising a mace to smash the skulls of Egypt's enemies. This was a woman who held absolute power. But then, in the 12th year of her reign, she vanished. The history books say she disappeared. The inscriptions stop. The statues are smashed. For decades, we thought she died of the plague or fell out of favor. But the body in Cave 35 suggests she didn't just fade away. In 2010, the Egyptian Mummy Project decided to test the DNA of the 18th dynasty royals. They wanted to build a family tree from the marrow of the dead. They tested the pharaoh Akhenaten. They tested King Tutankhamun, and they tested the nameless younger lady found broken in the tomb. The results were immediate and indisputable. The younger lady was the biological mother of King Tutankhamun. The archaeological world held its breath. We knew Nefertiti was Akhenaten's great royal wife. We knew she raised Tutankhamun. If the younger lady was Tut's mother, then the mystery was solved. The broken body was Nefertiti. But then the geneticists looked closer and the theory fell apart. The DNA didn't just say she was Tut's mother, it revealed her relationship to the father, Akhenaten. The markers indicated that the younger lady was the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Taya. That meant she was Akhenaten's full sister. This was the kill switch for the Nefertiti theory. We have thousands of inscriptions about Nefertiti. We know her titles: Great of Praises, Lady of Grace, Possessed of Charm. But in all of Egypt, there is not a single line of text that calls her king's sister. In the 18th dynasty, titles were currency. If you were a royal sister, you shouted it from the pylons. Nefertiti never did. The history tells us she came from the nobility, perhaps a cousin, but definitely not a sister. So the door slammed shut. The experts concluded that the younger lady was just an anonymous sister wife, a vessel used to breed an heir who died and was forgotten. Nefertiti remained lost. But they were looking at the data wrong. A French Egyptologist named Marc Gabolda realized that the DNA analysis had a fatal flaw. It was assuming these people were normal. They weren't. The 18th dynasty was a genetic disaster zone. They didn't just marry cousins once. They did it for 3 generations straight. Akhenaten's parents were related. His grandparents were related. When you stack that much incest on top of itself, the DNA gets tangled. The genetic diversity shrinks so much that a first cousin looks like a sister on a test. Gabolda ran the calculations again, factoring in this extreme endogamy. When you adjust for the inbreeding, the sister result fades, and a new probability emerges: first cousin. And Nefertiti, she fits the profile of a first cousin perfectly. This changes everything. It means the sister label was a genetic illusion. The woman in the tomb, the mother of the boy king, is Nefertiti. If we accept this body as Nefertiti, we have to face the horror of her reality. Forget the beautiful bust in Berlin. That was propaganda. The mummy reveals a woman who was physically falling apart. The inbreeding didn't just confuse the DNA tests, it destroyed their bodies. She passed these defects down to her son, Tutankhamun, who was born with a cleft palate, a club foot, and an immune system so weak that a simple mosquito bite eventually killed him. But Nefertiti didn't die of a genetic defect. She died because she tried to be king. Historical evidence suggests that when Akhenaten died, the throne didn't go straight to the child Tutankhamun. There was a transition. A ruler named Smenkhare appears in the record, a pharaoh who appears out of nowhere and rules for barely a year. Many Egyptologists now believe Smenkhare was Nefertiti. She didn't disappear, she ascended. She adopted a new name, grabbed the crook and flail, and stood alone against a country that hated her. She was the face of the heresy. The priests of the old gods were circling. The army was restless. The empire was bankrupt. She was the last barrier between the dynasty and total collapse. And that is when the attack happened. Let's go back to the face of the mummy. For years, it was assumed tomb robbers smashed her mouth to get to gold amulets inside the wrappings. But modern CT scans show the fracture lines in her cheek, jaw, and eye socket are sharp. The bone didn't crumble like dry ancient dust. It splintered. This implies elasticity. It implies the flesh was still there. The injury is consistent with a high-velocity blow from a heavy object with a specific blunt edge. Forensic reconstruction suggests the weapon was a mace, the traditional weapon of the pharaoh. The irony is sickening. Nefertiti, the woman depicted on temple walls holding a mace to execute prisoners, was likely killed by one. The angle of the wound suggests the attacker was standing in front of her, slightly to the right. This wasn't a battle. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution. Imagine the scene. The palace at Amarna, the guards turn, or perhaps an assassin sent by the exiled priests slips into the royal quarters. The blow is struck directly to the face. It shatters the jaw and severs the major arteries. Death would have been instant, or followed seconds later by massive blood loss. This explains why her reign as king lasted less than a year. It explains why her name was erased. It explains why her body was found stripped of its royal identity, hidden in a side chamber of a different tomb. She was murdered to make way for the restoration of the old gods. The story of Nefertiti has always been told as a romance of beauty. We look at the Berlin bust and see a goddess, but the younger lady mummy forces us to see the human. She was a woman trapped in a collapsing genetic bloodline, married to a zealot who gave birth to a dying son. She tried to hold the world together by sheer force of will, and for her ambition, she was bludgeoned to death. Her son, the young Tutankhamun, was left to pick up the pieces, a crippled boy sitting on a throne built on his mother's bones. So the next time you see that famous image of Nefertiti with her swan-like neck and her slight smile, remember the face that lies beneath the mask. Remember the shattered jaw and the silence of the tomb. Beauty may be eternal, but in the Game of Thrones, survival is never guaranteed. Do you think the evidence is enough to close the case on Nefertiti? Or is the queen still waiting to be found? If you want to stay updated on this discovery and explore more mysteries of the ancient world, make sure you're subscribed. The truth is often buried deeper than we think.